Alright, so here's another little quick thing we can talk about in terms of resolving this apparently problematic thing that seems to happen. Because if you look at what's going on in the world, it seems like there is something that's kind of driving all of our activity. For me, it was essentially that underlying disquiet. There's something wrong. It's like this, I don't know, Paul Hederman was in my area in Toronto recently, and he essentially said it's like a parasite, and that's kind of a good analogy for what seems to happen. Although, the idea that there's some separate parasite can give rise to a lot of ideas about separation and that sort of thing. That there's some kind of separate thing on another thing, a separate parasite on another thing called me, the host. But in terms of the experiential validity of what happens, it feels like that there's life, and then there's something that thinks it's separate, which is actually the same life. But there's a sensation, like that's why this is it's more about feeling and thinking, this whole thing. It's more about intuition than cognition. So sort of looking in and feeling how this stuff kind of operates, what's really going on, and what's constant in all of this activity. So most of my life was spent trying to find a relief for something that was going wrong, that I felt was going wrong, and trying to kind of keep myself in a state of aliveness. So it's like my life is kind of monotonous, just kind of like going along at a sort of just fluttering along, nothing much going on. And I want to have like these peaks. I want to have roller coaster emotions maybe, or keep myself in a sort of an agitated state that makes me feel more alive. But I find that what Paul Hederman calls parasite, the notion of being separate, seems to always interpret that aliveness. It takes aliveness and interprets it into something that I can use or gain, sort of claim, put my flag in, and call it mine. And all that, everyone can look and see how this works. It's very simple, the mechanics of how this stuff kind of plays out. And then what's even more apparent as we look is the looking, is the actuality of the lookingness or the seeing. And so that's very apparent, because it's the only actual real, you could say it's the only real thing there is. I would say it's the only reality there is. Don't even put thing or no thing on it, because that can just drive you crazy. It's amazing what we cook up. We can kind of laugh at ourselves now, seeing this. It's like, look at this crazy thing going on between my ears. No one can see it, really, but the manifestations of it are very visible. I was always anxious. I'm always feeling like there's a threat going on. So, the face muscles tighten up, and it's like, oh, there's something, there's a big threat happening to me. And so the effects of that notion of being separate, they do manifest outward, and they create a very tumultuous and sort of unpleasant, heavy dream. And we can see all this play out, and we don't have to do anything about it, we don't have to judge it. Being what we are, being this presence, is the solution. Recognizing that that's what we are right now sort of undercuts the entire thing, so we don't need to keep sort of repeating these old behaviors and all that sort of stuff. It sounds kind of like a therapy idea, but it's what Paul Hederman calls traveling lighter. The seeing of this translates into traveling lighter in the day-to-day life, in real time, if you like, as it's happening. Because the nature of this awareness is just open and light, you could say. It doesn't have baggage. It's like a plane just sort of gliding, and there's nothing weighing it down. It doesn't have to struggle and keep its engine going. It's just sort of, or maybe like a hawk or something. It's just sort of riding on the updraft, and it's not having to always flap its wings and keep. You can't see the camera too well, but anyway, it's like you don't have to keep this thing going like some kind of activity where you're just kind of grinding the gears together to keep this engine turning, because that's the sense. It's sort of like this internalized, self-perpetual combustion engine. I have to always have fuel to keep myself running, and it's sort of that addictive sense that I need extra things on top of my basic needs in order to keep myself afloat. So that's really what this is about. It's about simplifying life in a certain sense. That's the experiential translation. Life becomes very simple, moment to moment, if you like. Not that there are separate moments, but like right now there's just listening, talking and listening, and thinking. And thinking is just thinking. It just is what it is. An appearance in that awareness. And that's it. It doesn't imply something. None of our stories imply anything. They are just as they are. It's like, when I was a kid, I used to read kids' books, like Curious George or something. And it's like, that's the same type of thing. There's a story written, and that's all it is. It's not like Curious George is actually going to appear somewhere and, get up to some shenanigans later on. It's just the story as it appears. And then you close the book and then it's over. The story's over. But what we've done is we've taken stories in, sort of uploaded them into the system, and then we've gotten so used to them that we sort of tune into them, or we're tuning into the different frequencies of me, essentially my story. And then we keep that alive because we think it has relevance, because we think it's about me, it's about someone that I am. So this is really just about clarifying that basic sort of identity crisis. It's sort of an ongoing identity crisis. So we can clarify that by seeing that what we are is just simply presence. It's present here as aware being. I mean, you can feel into it in a certain sense. It's really itself. It's not like there's anything separate feeling into it. So that's it. I mean, the intuitive sense, that deep internal recognition that this is real somehow, that there's something real here, and it doesn't negate anything, and yet it isn't restricted to anything. So it's just the simplicity of this. I mean, that's what's sought through all these activities, is just to come home, in a sense, to just being right here. It's not hard. Seeking's hard. It's hard to be a seeker. It feels difficult. The actuality of living isn't hard. We just don't notice the simplicity, and we superimpose ourselves sort of as this extra coagulation of impulses and wants and desires and preferences, and there's nothing wrong with any of that stuff of itself. When it's taken to be myself, who I am, then it is problematic, because it's like taking a bunch of clouds and trying to keep them together and not have them blow away as they will. Taking a bunch of light appearing on a screen and trying to make sure it doesn't disperse. So it's just a simple matter of looking and seeing what's going on. The seeing's already happening. We can just notice it. In a way, we can't not notice it. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's more just context specific. So if someone has a question that comes up, then it's easy to look into it from that angle. But for right now,